Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today proudly to support this budget. I think it is everything that one would expect of a good Liberal budget. In 2016, as you saw, the budget actually looked at issues of how we would help the middle class and those hoping to join it to be able to get more money in their pockets. And so the child benefit, the lowering of taxes for the middle class, that facilitated that. And if we looked at the data a year later, we find that, in fact, there was an increase in spending on household items and on general retail spending in the first place. So that achieved what it wanted to achieve. And now this budget 2017 is focusing on jobs, focusing on how people in that middle class could get good, solid, permanent, well-paying jobs, and focusing on how industry and sectors that create jobs can actually create more of those permanent, well-paying jobs for the people to get it. And so this is a budget that built on the last budget. This is a budget that is actually saying, here is how we move people into that place where they get better jobs. And I think we know that actually it is not enough just to say we want to create new jobs. We know that government in itself does not create new jobs, but we create a climate, we foster, we are given initiatives to businesses and industries to create jobs and to help what we think are a group of people who, as we well know, Canada has good education, has actually good workers who are intelligent and who understand the issues, but we need to move into the new sector of work, that global economy where we know that innovation is where we're going to have to get our Canadian citizens to be able to find jobs. And so I think in speaking to that, we also needed to look at the gendered budget. How do women fare in this new world of work? How are women going to get opportunities? We saw when we did the infrastructure that only 2% of women work in infrastructure projects, in construction. And we know the reason that they don't. And the reason that they don't, and they have told us over and over, is that that kind of work needs flexibility. That kind of work needs the ability to sometimes spend long hours working and sometimes not working because of the weather. And so childcare, being able to put $7 billion over 10 years into fostering not just child care, but actually good development, learning and development for the children as well, for the next generation. This is the most important thing we can do in helping women to get into the workforce, into the well-paying permanent jobs that we're talking about. And so I also think, oh, Mr. Speaker, by the way, I'm just reminded that I am splitting my time with the member from Vaughan Woodbridge. And so it's not only childcare, but it is looking at how we can help families to adjust to the world of work so that they can be more flexible. And I think allowing women who are pregnant to have another 4 weeks of maternity leave if they choose, and I add everything is if you choose, and then to also ensure that we move from 12 months to 18 months of parental leave that is flexible. Parents can decide who wants to stay at home and who wants to be able to balance that world of paid work and that world of helping to raise your children. And we have set a staggered kind of formula for people to be allowed to make a decision on how they do that. The second part of getting people to work is to create ways in which people can have access to skills, training, post-secondary education. And to facilitate that, you see a very clear way of getting adults who are already in the workforce, but who only have part-time work and who are not in that world of good-paying jobs, to be able to go back to university. So we are suggesting that the student grants bring in part-time people who are working part-time to be able to get access to that kind of training. We also know that EI has been changed so that if you are working and you have a particular job, but it's not a long, well-paying job, that you may be able actually to start working on getting training at the same time while you're working on that older job. We're also looking at how student loans can become a flat-rate student loan system so that in the old days you couldn't qualify if you owned a home or if you were working part-time. We're now saying if you own a home and you're working part-time and you have children, you can have access to an expanded and flat-rate student loan program. So this is about getting people to get into the job workforce. But now we need to talk about how to get those jobs to be created. And so helping industry, And helping businesses to be able to move into this new world of work is something that we are going to do. And as you can see, we are actually talking about innovation in 5 areas that Canada already has a strong reputation in those innovative sectors, and we're focusing on 5 sectors. This is not the end of it. We're starting by focusing in areas. And this, of course, as you well know, is agri-food. This is good news for my province of British Columbia. We're looking at advanced manufacturing, which you know is good news for people back in Ontario and in Quebec. We're also looking at biotech and health sciences, and of clusters. The clusters in British Columbia, biotech and health sciences are creating clusters and hubs of new innovation in health sciences, and of course of looking at pharmaceuticals and creating hubs for delivering that. We have Triumph in British Columbia. All of these groups are going to benefit to creating these new kinds of jobs. And of course clean tech, and we saw recently that the Minister of ISED came into British Columbia, and British Columbia, I proudly add, has only about 13% of the Canadian population, but we are creating 33% of the high-tech jobs in our province. So helping us to be able to move forward into those areas of looking at innovation and clean technology is something that's going to not only benefit my province, but benefit every province that we're looking at. Now, I want to tell you one thing that has always been a priority for British Columbia, and that is housing. This is where we see housing prices going out of any kind of bounds of anybody being able to afford. We see those problems. But I think by putting what I consider to be a good amount of money, first and foremost the news here is the federal government is getting back into national housing, working with provinces and territories and municipalities and NGOs and groups that create housing in private sector, in other areas where housing is being created. But we know we can't do everything in 1 year or in 2 years or even in 3 years. So by looking at focusing right now, which is what the minister heard when he did his consultation on national housing, is that we should focus first on the most vulnerable. And this budget is doing exactly what it heard. It is focusing on seniors, on mental health and addictions. It is focusing on veterans, and it's focusing on housing for Aboriginal people. We have a huge urban Aboriginal population in the city of Vancouver, and back in the West we have huge urban Aboriginal populations, as well as on reserve, that need access to good housing. And we're also back again to this gendered budget where we're saying a lot of women fleeing violence are going to be on that list of priorities. Now, we are also recognizing that you cannot make good public policy unless you have good data. And by putting $40 million into Statistics Canada to develop what we are calling a housing statistic framework, to look at how we get data and not just perceptions that say foreign buyers are driving the prices up, et cetera, we need good data to find out who is doing what, where, when, what is needed, how a mortgage is affecting first-time buyers. And then, thirdly, we're looking at that full spectrum of housing by putting in extra money, by expanding the homelessness framework with $2.1 billion. We are looking at the full spectrum of needs, from homelessness into SROs, which is single rooming occupancy, into affordable rental housing, because if we don't look at affordable rental housing, which at the moment is where the bottleneck occurs, to being able to help young people and first-time buyers to buy a little starter home, and to working with CMHC and co-op housing to do that, that is the kind of spectrum and the partnerships that we're building in creating housing. How does housing help? Housing is a human right. The ability for family to have a safe place to bring up their kids, an ability for when those kids grow up to go into good education and skills training. We're looking at that whole continuum of how we help Canadians to be able to achieve the kind of opportunity, get the kind of opportunities they need to fulfill their potential, to be able to get work, to be able to find good jobs, to be able to spend money back into the economy, and how businesses in this new world of work can actually be able to get that work to the people. I am so proud of this budget. I can go into transit to get people to and from work and say that the Broadway line that is going to be built in my riding and extending into Vancouver Quadra is going to be great news. I know our mayor has already put out a big press release saying how pleased he is with some things in the budget that are going to fulfill the needs of the people in Vancouver and the needs by other mayors of the people in British Columbia. And so this budget not only serves British Columbia well, it not only serves the city of Vancouver well, it goes across this country. And this, Mr. Speaker, is where I sit down and I say how proud I am of a good, well thought out, comprehensive Liberal budget. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments?